Tata urdvam vanam tadvai Purusha varjayantiti Sa charanuchara Sa charanuchara samyukta Vichachara vinadvanam Tata urdvam vanam tadvai Purusha varjayantihi Sachanuchara samyukta Vichachara vanadvanam Tata urdvam vanam tadvai Purusha varjayantihi Sacharanachara samyukta Vichachara vanadvanam Tata urdvam vana tadvai Purusha varjayantihi Sachanachara samyukta Vichachara vanadvanam Tata urdvam vanam tadvai Purusha varjayantihi Sachanaruchara samyukta Vichachara vanad. Ladies, please. Tata urdvam vanam tadvai Purusha varjayantihi Sachatnuchara samyukta Vichachara vanadhanam Tata urdvam vanam tadvai Purusha varjayantihi Sachatnuchara samyukta Vichanara vanadvanam Tata urdvam. From that time onward. Vanam, forest. Tat, that. Vai, in particular. Purushaha, males. Varjayanti, do not enter. He, indeed. Sa, sadyumna, in the form of a woman. Cha, also. Anuchara samyukta, accompanied by his companions. Vichachara, walked. Vanat, vanam, within the forest from one place to another. Translation: since that time no male has entered that forest, but now King Sadyumna, having been transformed into a female, began to walk with his associates from one forest to another. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. In Bhagavad Gita 222.22, it is said, Vasamshi jirnani yata vihaya navani grananti naro parani tata sharirani vihaya jirnani anyani samyati navani dehi. A person who puts on new garments, giving up old ones, as a person puts on new garments, giving up old ones, the soul accepts new material bodies, giving up the old and useless ones. paragraph. The body is just like a dress, and here this is proved. So Dyumna and his associates were all male, which means that their souls were covered by male dress. But now they became female, which means that their dress was changed. The soul, however, remains the same. It is said that by modern medical treatment, a male can become transformed into a female, and a female into a male. The body, however, has no connection with the soul. The body can be changed either in this life or the next. Therefore, one who has knowledge of the soul and how the soul transmigrates from one body to another does not pay attention to the body, which is nothing but a covering dress. Pandita samadarshanaha. Such a person sees the soul, which is part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. Therefore, he is samadarshi, a learned person. So this is a fascinating chapter, very relevant to modern gender equality topic. A lovely topic, lively topic at least. So, chapter summary. It's a little complicated. I mean, the chapter summary is a little complicated. So I think there's two ways. I could just wing it, or I could read it from the chapter summary, or I could read the verses leading up to this verse. Wing it? I'm going to read the chapter summary, thank you. So, Manu. In every day of Brahma, there's 14 Manus. And one of those Manus is Vivasvata Manu, who is the son of Vivaswan, who's, we'll just read. By the desire of Maharaj Parikshit, Shukadeva Goswami told about the dynasty of Vivasvata Manu, who was formerly King Satyavrata, the ruler of Dravida. So when there's a change of Manus, there's a partial devastation. And so the Vivasvata Manu previously was somebody else. He was a king in South India, Dravida. While describing this dynasty, he, that's Shukadeva Goswami, also described how the Supreme Personality Godhead, while lying down in the waters of devastation, gave birth to Brahma from a lotus generated from his navel. Now that's the birth of Brahma. And then each day of Brahma, there's 14 Manus, and with the change of Manu, so it's kind of blended. Chapter summary helps us understand. That is to say that the birth of Brahma is not every change of Manu, but the birth of Brahma is described in the course of describing Vivasvata Manu. So in case you get confused, you can get unconfused, because there's overlapping of topics, which is quite okay. A narrator can overlap topics, and that's what happens here in this chapter. From the mind of Lord Brahma, Marichi, there are other mental sons of Brahma, but one of them was Marichi. From his mind, pretty good, just from your mind you produce somebody. Can anybody here do that? I don't think so. Brahma can do that. Marichi was generated. From his, and his son was Kashyapa. From Kashyapa, through a deity, Vivaswan was generated, and from Vivaswan came Shraddhadeva. Now, Shraddhadeva Manu is another name of Vivasvata Manu. was born from the womb of Sangya. Shraddhadeva's wife, Shraddha, gave birth to 10 sons, such as Ikshvaku and Riga. So Ikshvaku, we know from Bhagavad Gita, chapter 4. So there's some newer people here. Chapter 4, Bhagavad Gita, is where Krishna is describing the disciplic succession, where Krishna instructed the sun god Vivaswan. Vivaswan instructed his son Manu, that's Vaivasvata Manu. Manu instructed his son Ikshvaku. So this is the Sun dynasty. And Ikshvaku was given this earth planet to rule by his father. And who was his father? Huh? Vaivasvata Manu. So Vaivasvata Manu built Ayodhya, and he gave, on this planet. Manu built a city on this planet and gave the kingdom to his son to rule this planet. So Lord Ramachandra came in that dynasty, and what's being described in chapter 4 Bhagavad Gita is that Sun dynasty from Vivaswan, and Krishna said, I instructed Vivaswan long ago. And Arjuna said, what? How's that possible? So this is 9th canto, chapter 1, and it's describing lineages of kings, specifically in this case, the Surya dynasty, and there's many, many great kings in the Surya dynasty. Lord Ramachandra is one of them. And it's a historical record. And the authority speaking the historical record is Shukadeva Goswami. And where did Shukadeva Goswami get his understanding? From his father, Vyas. And how did Vyas get his understanding? He's a literary incarnation of the Supreme Lord. It was known to him because he's an incarnation of the Supreme Lord, taught his son, etc. So this is in the 9th canto. It's a description of the Sun dynasty, at least this part. And then it gets, complicated. So far it's not complicated, but it gets complicated. Shraddhadev Manu, or Vaivasvata Manu, so that's another name, the father of Maharaj Ikshvaku, because he's in that line of Vivaswan, Vaivasvata Manu, Ikshvaku. So Vaivasvata Manu was sonless before Ikshvaku's birth, but by the grace of the great sage Vishishta, he performed a yajna to satisfy Mitra and Varuna. Mitra and Varuna are 2 devas, and Vishishta, the priest, the Brahmana, was assisting Manu to have a son. And the procedure was Vishishta entrusted the yajna to generate the auspiciousness for a son to a priest, to a Brahmana priest that knew how to do that yajna. And one of the procedures in a yajna is you say what your sankalpa is. We all know what sankalpa is, right? Sankalpa means intention. So his wife, Vaivasvata Manu's wife, said, I want a daughter. So the priest did the mantras to get a daughter, and so a daughter was born. And Vaivasvata Manu was, wait a minute, Vishishta, what happened? I wanted a son, and he said it was some confusion. I'll fix the confusion. By his own power, he transformed the daughter into a son. No surgical operation, just mystical power. Then, although Vaivasvata Manu, wanted a son, by the desire of his wife, he got a daughter named Ila. Manu, however, was not satisfied with the daughter. Consequently, for Manu's satisfaction, the great sage Vasishta prayed for Ila to be transformed into a boy, and his prayer was fulfilled by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So Vasishta is way up there as far as Brahminical power is concerned. And where does he get his power from? Same place everyone gets their power, from anything. So it was a yes. So Ila became a male. Vaivasvata Manu was happy. And they named the boy Sudyumna. So that's the title of the chapters. King Sudyumna becomes a woman. Once upon a time, Sudyumna went on tour with his ministers. At the foot of Mount Sumeru, there is a forest named Sukumara. What's Mount Sumeru? Anybody a cosmology fan? You're a cosmology fan. Tell us what you know about Sumeru.
It's the mountain in the center. It's okay. So, Bhumandala is a flat plane at the bottom of the universe.
Yes.
And there's a central island in Bhumandala called Jambudweep.
Jambudweep.
And in the center of Jambudweep, there's a gigantic mountain that's kind of in the shape of an upside-down cone.
Yes.
Called Mount Sumeru, made out of solid gold.
Solid gold. Pretty cool.
Pretty cool.
Okay. And so surrounding, in this central island, Jambudweep, Dweepa means island, and there's 7 concentric islands, which is something we don't see, where there's a ring and that's an island, and then there's some ocean, and then there's another island that's a ring, so forth. That's the description of cosmology, the flat earth theory. And it's not just flat. There's topography, there's mountains, and there's trees, and there's et cetera, and the mountain ranges divide tracts of land called varshas, and it's very complicated. The language is interesting. But the place where King Sudyumna happened to go, somehow he knew how to navigate his way to Sumeru, this golden mountain. And as they were approaching Sumeru, there was a particular forest that is inhabited by Lord Shiva. Now, where's Lord Shiva's abode? Oh, he's got 7 of them. He's got 7 of them. So if you want your head to spin, you can start to consider what are those 7. But one of them is at the base of Mount Sumeru in a particular forest named Sukumara. And as soon as they entered that forest, they were all transformed into women. And Maharaj Parikshit wanted to know how that happened. Shukadeva Goswami described how Sudyumna, well, how did it happen? You're going to say?
I think I know.
I think I know too. But he's giving you the microphone. Where's this audience participation time?
I'm pretty sure Shiva and Parvati were enjoying in this forest at one point, and then this sage came to visit Shiva, and Parvati was embarrassed to be seen in that state, and so she asked Shiva to.
Well, he made a promise. She didn't ask, "Can you do this?" She said, "Look, anybody else that comes into this forest
will be turned into a female.
Become women.
Yeah.
So you don't need to be so embarrassed."
Yeah.
And so it was.
Thank you.
From that time, no one came into the forest except Sudyumna didn't know the rule. And as soon as he went into the forest, voila, he and his associates became women. So Ila became Sudyumna, became a woman. A woman became a man, became a woman. And this woman doesn't give her name. she accepted a man as her husband. The husband was the son of the moon. So this is the Surya dynasty mixing with the moon dynasty. So her husband was the son of the moon, named Buddha, spelled differently, B-U-D-H-A, and they had a son. So Sushumna transformed into a woman, married, and had a husband who was the son of the moon, the sun, S-U-S-O-N, son of the moon god, and they had a son. And the son's name was Pururava. So what happened next? This is like very interesting, huh? By the grace of Lord Shiva, so Sushumna went and said, can you help me? Can I become a man again? And he made a compromise. 1 month man, 1 month woman. 1 month man, 1 month woman. So Sushumna, as a man, went back to his kingdom to rule. But the citizens weren't so happy. For 1 month he's a king, and then he's gone for a month. They didn't know exactly didn't say, but they didn't know. He became a woman and then became back and became their king. And pretty complicated, huh? By the grace of Lord Shiva, Sushumna received the benediction that he would live 1 month as a woman and 1 month as a man, thus regained his kingdom and had 3 sons. That's when he was the king. Utkala, Gaya, and Vimala, who were all very religious thereafter. He entrusted the kingdom to Pururava and took the order of Vanaprastha life. And they all lived happily ever after. Any questions? So Pururava was the son of Sushumna when Sushumna became a woman and married the child, the son, the male child of the moon god, Buddha. So Buddha and that female. So the kingdom was transferred over to Pururava, who was their child. So no, it's complicated, interesting, complicated storyline. And I'd like to comment on something on what Prabhupada writes in the purport of verse 33. The body can be changed either in this life or the next. Therefore, one who has knowledge of the soul and how the soul transmigrates from one body to another does not pay attention to the body, which is nothing but a covering dress. So, what about Vedic culture? Do those who are self-realized souls ignore the fact that we have a body and the respect that goes to one who's older and mercy to one who's younger and make friends with those who are equal? If you're an Uttama Adhikari, you don't pay attention to that stuff. Or any other consideration that has to do with the dress. Do transcendental, not us, do perfected souls ignore, just do not pay attention to the body, which is nothing but a covering dress? There's so many examples. I'll give 2 examples. They're recent ones that I've been involved with. When Krishna accepted the invitation of Yudhishthira to go all the way from Dwarka to Indraprastha to participate with him in the Rajasuya Yajna. It's really far out. The entourage, the distance between Dwarka and Indraprastha is really far, and the entourage that traveled with Krishna was massive. 16,108 queens, each with a palanquin, each with maidservants, each with bodyguards for the queens, each with their, because they were going to be gone for like 4 months at least, so all their garments and jewelry and ornaments and stuff for, the royalty of the queens of Dwarka. And their 10 sons, 16,108 times 10, and their children, and military and ministers and brahmanas and elephants and, gosh, what a big deal. Traveling all the way. And then when they, so there's long description, when they reached there, there's a whole discussion about respect shown to Krishna and respect shown by Krishna to them, each one according to their situation of age, of gender, and so, and the Pandavas and the assembly at Indraprastha, they're perfected souls. They're not sadhakas, they're perfected souls. And they observe etiquette. Here's another example. There's details and details and details of how that was done. Another section of the Chaitanya Charitamrita has to do with Antya-lila chapter 4. It's nice, really nice, instructive section where Sanatana Goswami goes to visit Mahaprabhu in Puri. It's the third time they're together, and there's lots of things that happen in that chapter 4. But one of the things that happens, two of the things that happen, is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu teaches Sanatana Goswami, who is a perfected soul, how to observe etiquette when the residents from Navadvip come prior to Rath Yatra, even prior to the Gundicha temple cleansing. They come to Puri. He brings Sanatana Goswami to meet every one of them and instructs Sanatana Goswami, A and B, how to properly respect those that are senior, those that are peers, those that are juniors, but respect appropriately. So respect is the foundation, and there's different etiquettes. And then they, in turn, it's described. He wanted Sanatana Goswami to get their blessings. I mean, he can bless them, but he wanted Sanatana Goswami to get their blessings. And then they, in turn, there's Sanskrit terms, that some gave their blessings, some made friendship, and some offered their respects. And then one of the whole major parts of this message is Sanatana Goswami being invited by Mahaprabhu to have lunch. He didn't go a direct route, he went an indirect route along the sea in the peak of the summer season where the sand is as hot as fire, literally, and his feet burned. But he went that way because he was observing etiquette. And Lord Chaitanya was very appreciative. There's no one that has etiquette standards like you. I want you to write a book about etiquette. I mean, that's not exactly how it happened, but that's what happened. Or, so when Krishna comes to Indraprastha, the reception of Queen Kunti, or when Krishna is leaving Hastinapur after the Kurukshetra battle, the exchange with Kunti, the exchange with everyone. Men and ladies are not equal. Although we're not the body, the souls are equal, and the bodies are, there's etiquettes involved, convention, or Vaishnava Achar that is to be observed, even for those souls that are perfected. They don't just do to set an example. They do to set an example. But it's preservation of etiquette, because that's part of the fabric of a self-realized soul. They observe even things that are of this world because it's conducive. They don't violate things that are of this world because they're transcendentalists. So it's a fine line, and one of the things that helps demarcate the fine line is respect. Or say it the other way. When respect is missing, then everything becomes chaotic. When recognizing the spirit soul, different than the body, the real self is the spirit soul, when that's missing, you don't have a spiritual conception, you have a material conception. And that's chaotic. So how do you mix? Or is it really a mix? What is it? How are we supposed to conduct ourselves? This is, feeding into the modern context of one of the hot topics in the ISKCON world, at least these days, the gender equality topic. And I'm not really eager to touch fire, because it's a hot topic. And it's not easy to understand. Or say it the other way. If you're a transcendentalist, it's easy to understand. And if you're not a transcendentalist, it's not easy to understand. Is it this or is it that? How can it be that if it's this? And how can it be this if it's that? How are we as sadhakas supposed to conduct ourselves? You can see on the screen, therefore one who has knowledge of the soul and how the soul transmigrates from one body to another does not pay attention to the body, which is nothing but a covering dress. We don't pay attention to it in terms of identifying with it, yet at the same time, there's etiquettes that are observed, and they're practical. They're protective of elevated souls, what to speak of everybody else that's not an elevated soul. So elevated souls behave in a manner that's exemplary to help those that aren't so elevated. And those that aren't so elevated look to those who are elevated to see what the standards are. And so, although the self-realized soul does not pay attention to the body, which is nothing but a covering dress, they observe etiquettes, social norms. So I'll say one more thing and get ready for rotten tomatoes to be thrown at me, because I'm sure there's opinions out there. Paradharma and Swadharma. Paradharma means the function of the living entity in unobstructed relationship with the personality of Godhead, our eternal constitutional position and a servant of Krishna, Paradharma. Savang punksang paro dharmo yato bhaktir hoksajay ahaitokiya pratyataya yatma suprasidati, from Bhagavatam. That's one place where Paradharma is spoken. It's the unobstructed transcendental relationship, regardless of material anything, regardless of the dress or the coverings or conditioning or birth or anything, regardless. It's Paradharma is that connection. And the duties of one. And the Swadharma is translated in different ways, but it's the Dharma based upon the body. So one is subordinate to the other, but we don't trash the other, because you become a paradharmi. You observe. You observe unless there's some reason to not observe. here's two contrasting. This is two Prabhupada stories. One Prabhupada story is Prabhupada had a sister, and his sister looked upon Srila Prabhupada as a pure devotee, who was her brother. She had fond sisterly affection, and it was transcendental. So one time in Mayapur, she came to visit Prabhupada, and when she came in the room, she paid obeisances to her brother because she accepted him as a transcendental personality. And the personal servant got up and started to leave the room, and Prabhupada asked him, "Where are you going?" He said, "I thought you wanted to be alone with your sister." And he gave the instruction that, Chanakya Pandit saying, one should not be alone in a room with one's mother or sister or daughter. So you stay. Now they spoke in Bengali and they didn't understand anything anyways, but he was setting the standard. And then maybe you've seen photographs. There are photographs of, on the other hand, Prabhupada going for morning walks with Mother Jamuna. So he who was above rules observed the rules, although he's not agitated by his sister. And so he had the privilege to act however he wanted to act, and had the stature to do so without compromising his own position. But obviously, if they're going for a walk alone, someone's taken a picture, seeing there's Prabhupada and there's Jamuna. Now maybe that was the idea. It was, maybe Audubon, or maybe it was Vishaka, or someone taking the picture. But they're walking side by side. Or there's one of Jamuna's statements was one of those mornings in England. It was wet. They're walking through a field, and she saw Prabhupada's. She thought, this is wonderful. Let me just walk in Prabhupada's footsteps. But as she was looking to walk in Prabhupada's footsteps, she couldn't see where his footsteps were. Then she looked behind herself, and she could clearly see where her footsteps were. So she asked Prabhupada, "How come I don't see your footsteps and I can see mine?" And his answer was, "One day you'll understand." And that was it. Now, it doesn't say that there wasn't anybody else in that morning walk. It's just, Prabhupada was a transcendentalist. But so as a transcendentalist, he observed and sometimes acted in a different way for his own reasons, but, reciprocating with the love of Mother Jamuna in this case. But he would observe. Or here's another one, another Prabhupada story. I heard this from Hari Sori. Prabhupada would not chastise ladies, except for Palika, because she could take it. Hari Sori told the story that Prabhupada's practice was precisely at noon he would take a bath, and then he would sit down right after bath, put on tilak and fresh dhoti, and then chant Gayatri. And the standard was lunch, hot, right after he finished Gayatri. So the cooks were wired for what Prabhupada's regulation was. And the practice was that when there were chapatis or puris, they had to be puffed up. So the first puri or chapati that was brought out wasn't puffed up. Prabhupada would poke a hole in the chapati or puri, steam would come out, and then he would break off a piece of the chapati or puri and take that with some vegetable, and that was part of his procedure of eating. So the puri, the chapati, didn't puff up. So he called Palika, and he lashed her. And she started to cry. And then when she left the room, yes, Prabhupada, I'll do it right. And Hari Sori was there and said, "I can't speak like this to ladies, but with Palika I can speak like this." So he was discriminating as to how he dealt with disciples in different circumstances. That's a personalism point. It's not a, you're not the body point. But generally speaking, because of psychophysical nature, women it's not as easy for women to take chastisement from the superior. Even it's Prabhupada, who they're loving and serving. He just didn't do it because it's hard for them. So we're not the body. We don't pay any attention to the body, which is nothing but a covering dress. At the same time, even a transcendentalist will do that. And since we're not transcendentalists like Prabhupada, how do we navigate that territory? When our philosophy is we're not the body, we have strong statements like this. We don't pay attention to the body, but we pay attention to the body. So there's lines. We don't cross those lines, although we're not the body. And so one of the fundamental points of all of this is, for Vaishnava etiquette, there's respect. And then respect is extended in different ways according to situations. Okay, I'm now ready for the hot seat questions. Yes?
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
I don't know how I drew this chapter out of all the chapters in the Bhagavatam. Go ahead.
Thank you so much for the class. Like you said, we are not the body, and yet we have to follow the etiquette. And you nicely explained the Swadharma and Paradharma.
I'm not able to hear you. I mentioned what?
Swadharma and Paradharma.
Okay. Paradharma and Swadharma.
Yeah. So, is it to be distinguished based on the material and spiritual? Because is it non-devotees and devotees? Because when devotees do any activity that is, my understanding is to be considered as paradharma because we are serving the Lord, especially pure devotees. So, is it kind of distinguished like that, non-devotees and devotees, or even in the devotees also there is Swadharma and Paradharma?
What do you think? No, let's put it, I won't put you on the hot seat. For one who is transcendental, there's no need to consider Swadharma. For those who are not yet fully transcendental, there's need to consider Swadharma. And the Swadharma purpose is to regulate and redirect such and such tendency, psychophysical tendency, towards the Supreme, to purify one from such tendency of having affinity for matter. So we observe.
Thank you, Maharaj.
For example, respect to brahmanas. That's a Swadharma. It's physical. It's on the physical plane. And it's to be observed. Now, the variable is the transcendentalness of the consciousness. When one is a pure devotee, one may observe Swadharma, but it's not for purification, it's for teaching. That's what Krishna says to Arjuna. Arjuna's argument is, I want out of here. So if Krishna is saying, even if you became perfect, you observe Swadharma. You perform your prescribed duty because it's instructive to others. What do you think?
Yes, Maharaj, absolutely. I understand.
Okay.
Thank
Now,
you.
it can become, Swadharma can be elevated to transcendence. It's Paradharma. But, for practitioners in the sadhana stage, now there are different ways to express. And you'll find examples that are contrast to what I just said. But because Prabhupada is very generous, just practice bhakti and you're on the transcendental platform. Voila. Because you're practicing bhakti. But that there's a gradation of bhakti, mixed and pure. Is that all right?
Yes, Maharaj.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Someone else?